Greetings to all, dear friends. You know that in dozens of my videos, I talk about so-called occult codes, about programmable reality, which we see first in some cartoons, films, advertising products, and then these events unfold in real life, and some perceive it purely as an accident. The majority of the population of both the Russian Federation and the United States watch Hollywood products, as well as products of other Western countries of South Korea, simply as entertainment content, and few people realize that almost everything we see in the scripts embedded in both major films and films of the so-called B and C classes, that is, those that don't go out on the big screens, immediately go on CDs to it, and so on. In fact, certain concepts are laid in the audience's brain there, which are then implemented in real life. And thus the population will already be subconsciously prepared for those concepts that have been implanted and laid down on the subcortex of people's consciousness for decades, and I have given hundreds of examples of films in which the future was shown. These are such long-running animated series like The Simpsons, in which there are literally hundreds of predictions in quotes that have already come true. There are probably some episodes that we haven't seen in real life yet, but those that were planned there. The show has been running for more than 30 years, since the early 90s, so there is, of course, a huge number of such predictions in quotes. And one of these predictions, which I have already told you about several times, is the presidency of Vladimir Zelensky in Ukraine, which was most likely programmed in the brain for the subcortex of TV viewers, moviegoers somewhere at the turn of the 2014 and 2015 years. Just shortly before that, Tom Clancy's latest novel was released. Tom Clancy died a rather strange death, being a healthy man and not too old. Literally 2 months, in my opinion, before the publication of his novel, where the annexation of Crimea to Russia was predicted. And this happened even before it naturally happened. And similar episodes slipped through in other series, for example, a fairly good series Madame Secretary of State, which was released in the 2014 year, in my opinion in October, if my memory serves me right. This is a pretty good, well-made series, where the main role was played by Tia Leone. She played the Secretary of State, like a prototype of Madeleine, only young enough. President Dalton in the United States was played by Carradine, the brother of the strangely deceased John Carradine in Bangkok under strange circumstances. I have also told you about this many times. And in one of the episodes called Russian Roulette, which was released on November 29th, that is, to 9/11. As you can see, there is an episode here. There were literally several predictions that came true, and very soon, which predicted, first of all, a special military operation, its results and most likely the consequences. For example, the battle for Mariupol was mentioned there. Yes, the battle for Mariupol has already taken place, but on a much smaller scale, because the fighting clashes took place there in the 2014 year. Yes, after the annexation of Crimea, and the events in the Donbas, of course. The general outline of events in Ukraine was known to people, so someone can say, well, yes, because they started creating a series based on the events that happened. In fact, as I have already told you, the series was released somewhere in the 20s of October, 2014 year. Of course, it began to be filmed much earlier than the Crimean events, than the events in the Donbass, than the Ilovaisk boiler, Debaltsevo boiler, and other events that took place in the 2014-2015 years, because usually such series, even if the first episodes are filmed at least a year, that is, we can assume that the first episodes of the first season were filmed back in the 2013 year. That is, even before the annexation of the Crimea and the events in the Donbass. There is an episode of 2015 year of Russian Roulette, under the occult course 9/11, the Secretary of State, Madame Secretaries of State performed by Tiva Elioni and us President Dalton are negotiating with Russian President Ostrova. The president is a woman. In fact, the president is expected. There is a very interesting map of Ukraine and Russia, where Crimea is already shown as part of Russia. That is, we know that, of course, at the time when this episode was most likely filmed, Crimea was already annexed, as you know. In my opinion, it's March 2000 of the 14th year, since the series was released. Or rather, this episode was released in November 2000 of the 15th year, then yes. It was already known that Crimea was annexed. But nevertheless, the annexation of Crimea with the United States and most countries was not officially recognized, however. On the map that President Dalton uses in the United States, Crimea is painted over with the colors of Russia. That is, there is Ukraine in two colors, the orange part and such a light pink, if memory does not change. Because it is not very well visible in the screenshots and everything else is Russian. So Crimea is shown to be Russian. That is, despite the fact that the United States did not recognize Crimea, the de facto map, as a legal document, shows that the United States recognizes Crimea for Russia on them. So, during the negotiations, they agree that Ukraine from Lugansk to the Black Sea, that is, almost to Odessa, and almost to Transnistria, departs to Russia. You can see it for yourself on the map, that is, perhaps this is one of the likely results of negotiations. That will certainly arise sooner or later, at least with the trilateral participation of Russia and Ukraine, and possible the United States or other so-called guarantors of the security of treaties. And most likely, indeed, these territories may be ceded to Russia under the treaty or receive such a quasi-independent status. But this coincidence is not limited to this, except especially Mariupol, where, as you know, the most severe battles took place. Starting, in my opinion, March 2022 year, and they lasted for quite a long time. The siege of Azovstal and so on. You all know about these events, you probably remember. So in the 2015 year, such a scale of events did not happen near Mariupol. Although Mariupol was an important strategic point on the southern front of the Donetsk region, but nothing so grandiose happened there. However, the series shows that after Mariupol, that is, after some grandiose battle, these negotiations will take place. And it describes, first of all, the president of Ukraine by the name of Bozic or Bozic. They pronounce it differently. It is written in the credits that the surname is Bozic, and now he is threatened by a certain nationalist leader who is rushing to power and trying to seize it in Ukraine. And what do you think his name is? His name is Oleg Zelensky. That is, literally the difference from Zelensky by one letter. Moreover, there is a full-face portrait of him in profile on the tablet screen, and for some reason he is very, very similar to the then actor Vladimir Zelensky, who is just starting to star in the TV series Servant of the People, which ended literally a month or a month and a half before his election as president in 2019. As I have already told you, I am 100% sure that the series Servant of the People was filmed specifically to make Zelensky, to introduce his image into people's heads as a future president, because there a certain school teacher Vasily Goloborodko becomes president for the fact that he scolded someone there with mats, and who is some of the school children took it off, and after that he became very popular all over the country. And on this wave he sort of drove into the president's office, and thus actor and producer Vladimir Zelensky, almost on the crest of the success of this series, creates the Servant of the People party of the same name, and wins with 73% of the votes. Poroshenko, as I have already told you, has 73. The number 37 and 73 was regularly found next to the name of Zelensky, Lukashenko, and Putin. It is with 73% of the votes that he wins the election from Poroshenko, and it is this figure that is shown at the stadium, in the commercial that was shown a couple of weeks before Zelensky was elected, where on the right hand of Zelensky at the stadium, where he goes out alone, there is a large figure of 73. And the office of President Zelensky commented on this as a curious coincidence. Well, I've told you about this dozens of times already. A group of such coincidences, but this is not the only coincidence. Because, literally, while the action of the episodes of Madame Secretary of State, Servant of the People, and other predictions was unfolding. Quarter 95 is Zelensky's production company played out such a comic episode, which featured Vladimir Putin and Alina Kabeva. And who do you think played Alina Kabeva? Of course, Zelensky. The episode was released on the 17th of May, 2014 year, that is, long before the release of the first episode of The Servant of the People, and long enough before the release of Madame Secretary of State on the screens. So in this episode Zelensky, of course, the situation between Alina Kabaeva and Putin is played out. Zelensky is sitting in a green dress, Putin comes into the room, and at the end of the episode, the question is asked, "Do you know who will be the next president of Ukraine?" And the answer is given, Alina will be the next president of Ukraine. As you can see, literally 3 minutes ago, this Alina was played by Vladimir Zelensky. In other words, this is a fairly transparent hint. Of course, everyone in the audience is laughing, it's funny for everyone, but really 5 years after the release of this episode, literally almost every day Zelensky becomes president. In other words, in my opinion, Zelensky was trained according to certain numerological parameters. The values of his surname Zeleny, Zelensky, Osiris Bacchus, Saint Patrick. I have already told you this chain many times. Somewhere around the turn of the 2014-2015 years. Well, then he was called Kolomoisky's puppet and so on. I have always expressed absolutely the opposite opinion. I believed that this man was not prepared for the post of president by some Kolomoisky. It was much more serious forces that prepared him, one can say from all sides. This is not a force inside Ukraine. This is a project that was supervised naturally somewhere. Somewhere from the decision-making centers, as it is fashionable to say now. So all these coincidences in surnames with a difference of one letter and everything else. This is just an example of things like this, and I am sure that we will find a lot more coincidences with future events, including the plot of Madam Secretary, most likely when peace talks happen, and peace talks will definitely happen. Because all wars end in peace talks. The only question is whether the map of the part that broke away from Ukraine will completely coincide with what we saw in the episode Madame Secretary of State, or it will be a little different. I'm not saying that all of these so-called programmable predictions will be 100% fulfilled. This is usually not a fait accompli, but there is a general outline, and perhaps it is in general terms, that everything will be exactly as it is shown in the series, because those who sponsor the series, those who invest some meanings there, they invest exactly what they plan. Naturally, this does not always work out, but we see that for the Twin Towers and other things, such things are a matter of time. And a matter of small details, but this is not so significant. There is a certain esoteric concept that is carried out when it is necessary according to astrological, numerological parameters. And of course for geopolitical reasons. So most likely, we will see exactly such a plot, no matter how much people would like it or would like it. But serious forces are working on it. That's it, dear friends. Please subscribe to this channel. Please like it after the 30th second. Otherwise this platform will not count them. The promotion of this video in YouTube recommendations depends on your likes. Accordingly, more people will see them. And your subscription to my channel in Musta will help me continue my research. I thank everyone who helps the channel, and I remind you once again that my occult elites the New World Order and the Pulse Matrix can be ordered with my autograph via email are indicated under each video, or without an autograph by direct links to the publisher I have spiked here in the description of this video. Have a nice day.